Hi, everyone. So I'll begin my talk with a message that there is no planet B, which we humans often forget, and we really need to monitor and control how we use the resources of our planet. In fact, I was recently encountered a book, a very famous book by Professor Simon Levin, Fragile Dominion, in which he has emphasized that our planet is losing its biodiversity at a large scale, and we need to be cautious about it, which has high future implications. So that is why the theme of this entire program, Tipping Points in Complex System, is of huge relevance. We've gathered here from last 2 weeks to understand what mechanisms determine the failure of system. By failure, I mean that sudden unwanted transitions in the system. So some of the factors we came across, and one of the crucial factors was the climate change, particularly climate warming. In the coming slide, I will tell you why understanding climate warming is important and what has happened over a period of time. So let's see. So this is the heat projection map, where the blue regions are the colder parts and the yellow or red regions are the hotter parts. This is the heat projection since period 1880. And as we move, you see that, please bear with me, you have to see this for some time. So you see that by the end of 2015, how the transition has taken place and the earth has become hotter. So this projection is not just limited to some data points on the heat map. They have serious implications, such as it can lead to sea ice loss, which is habitat for many species. It can also lead to forest fires, which, for an example, Amazon forest fire, which took place a few years back, is also an evidence of climate warming. Some of the other implications are the disturbance in the migration patterns of birds, which further leads to alteration in their life cycle processes. And coral bleaching. Corals, they are tremendous oxygen producers. So the coral bleaching, that is, the corals are also decaying due to global warming, is also an important implication of climate warming. So these implications, as told by Tim Linton in the other day talk, he suggested that these tipping points, these implications are associated to one another. These are the 9 active tipping points the Earth has faced, ranging from the loss of sea ice to shifts in the boreal forestry cover, and then the circulation change. So overall, climate change is playing a huge role in ecosystem functioning. Importantly, what we have found is that the climate warming is not just about the change in the magnitude of temperature. It leads to it is also about the rate of change at which it is happening. So here you see that by the period of 1900, the change is quite gradual. But by the end of 20th century, there is a sudden rise in the temperature anomalies of the system, of the planet. So these temperature anomalies are projected here, and there are several further future projection models used by IPCC, and they've suggested that in the business as usual scenario, if what we are doing is continued in a similar manner, we will see that the rise is expected to increase further very sharply. But if certain intervention strategies are taken, these are the projections which we are expecting in future. So while talking about the rate of change, we came across a few very significant literature, significant work, where the people have considered the rate rather than the magnitude of change, and they have seen sudden transitions in their systems. These are ecological systems in which the rate has played a very important role. So this intrigued us, and we came up with a question that, what is the impact of rate rather than the magnitude of warming on ecosystem functioning? To understand this question, the first step was we considered a basic consumer resource model with a time scale separation between the resource and the consumer. Here, the resource we are considering is moving on a faster time scale than the consumer. This is an unramped system, because here this R term, which is the intrinsic growth term of the resource, is temperature dependent. Here we are taking just the magnitude of temperature as a first step. So this temperature dependence in R is derived through the metabolic theory of ecology, according to which the rate control processes are based upon the reaction kinetics. As the temperature of a system increases, kinetic energy increases and molecular collision takes place, which leads to a reaction to happen. So this Boltzmann-Arrhenius function determines how this resource intrinsic growth rate is a function of temperature. To illustrate it more clearly, so here, this is the resource fitness, which is RT, and this is the temperature moving from 0 degree to 40 degrees Celsius. We see that as the temperature increases, the resource fitness increases, and it reaches some optimum value at temperature T opt. And after this optimum value, it declines with further increase in the temperature. So this is how the resource intrinsic growth rate is behaving. To understand the dynamics of the unramped system, we see that in the unramped system, we set the epsilon term, which is the time scale separation in our model. We set it to 0, and we obtain two parts. We obtain a critical manifold with a stable part, which is on this right side of this red solid circle, and the unstable manifold, which is on the green lines for each different temperature values. And here we have two unstable equilibrium points and one stable equilibrium point for each fixed value of T. So when we start for any temperature, when we start on the stable manifold, we move in the fast direction, which is the R direction, and converge to this equilibrium point. An important observation we conclude from here is that you see that the consumer density for varying temperature, different magnitude of temperature is different, this consumer equilibrium, but the resource density is same. So that means the resource density is independent of change of temperature in this model. Now, to understand the impact of rate of warming, we consider the ramped system where we introduce that the temperature is changing at a rate alpha. And now also there are two timescale separations. One is the epsilon, which is the timescale separation between the resource and the consumer, and the delta term, which is a timescale separation between the environmental process and the ecological process. So in this work, we consider two climate warming scenarios. One is where the cold regions are becoming warmer and hot regions are becoming hotter. And there is another paradoxical behavior due to climate warming, that some of the regions around the world, they are facing severe extreme winters. So we will cover these two climate warming scenarios. For that, we consider two cases when T is less than T opt and T is greater than T opt. This dotted line here in both the sides, you see this is the quasi-steady state attractor for the unramped system. And these are the trajectories we have obtained for the ramped system for different values of alpha. Now, on observing clearly, we see that for certain value of alpha, the trajectory starting at this point, it tracks the quasi-steady state equilibrium for both the cases. But when we set alpha equal to minus 0.1 here and 0.1 here, we see that setting the same initial condition, the trajectory goes to this direction, crosses this fold line, and it collapses. The resource density collapses. A surprising thing here is that there is no alternative steady state present here, but still we are able to see the collapse in the resource density, which is going to 0. And also one important thing I would like you to bring to notice in your notice, that here, all the conditions we have taken, we have taken all these trajectories starting from same initial condition. I will come to this point in the later slides, why I am mentioning this thing, that we have taken the same initial conditions for all the trajectories. So now we want to understand the mechanism behind this collapse, which is rate-induced collapse. In this, for this ramped system, we consider epsilon equal to 0. In the singular limit, we are studying the system, and we obtain a critical manifold, which is given by this equation. This critical manifold is a two-dimensional manifold. It essentially is the one-to-one correspondence between the consumer equilibrium points we have obtained. And on this manifold, we have a stable part, which is an attracting part, and an unstable part, a repelling part. Both the stable and unstable parts are separated by a fold line given by this equation. Now we have since we put epsilon equal to 0 and we have obtained the critical manifold, we now project this 3-dimensional system into 2-dimensional RT plane. So we get these two equations on the critical manifold. Now the system is behaving in this manner on the critical manifold. So here we see that at this, when this denominator terms goes to 0, the system trajectories, they will blow off. But there can be some special points in the system such that both the numerator and the denominator, they are going to 0. And those special points are termed as Canard points or folded singularities. So we do some time rescaling in the system and we this is a singular system which has singularity when the denominator is 0. And now we desingularize this system and obtain a desingularized projected system. In this system, we see that the equilibrium points of this desingularized system will give us both this term equal to 0 and this term equal to 0, that means the equilibrium points of this system are the folded singularities of this system, because both of the terms are getting to 0. And while we obtain the folded singularities, we draw a line, taking initial condition very close to that folded singularity, so that we can obtain a trajectory that moves from the stable part to the unstable part via that folded singularity. And using that linearization, we obtain the critical rate of warming, which induces warming-induced collapse in the system given by this expression. Here we observe one thing, that the difference T0 minus T opt, this is a very important, this difference is very important, because this determines that less is the distance, higher is the rate required for the collapse to happen. So this means that this difference creates a latitudinal variation between ecosystem collapse. This means that the species that are locating at temperate or Mediterranean regions, they are at higher risk of collapse than the species which are at tropical regions. Now to understand it numerically, this is the manifold here. This one is the red region is the stable part of the manifold, both here and here. And this green part is the unstable part of the manifold, with this dark red line as the fold line, which separates each of them. Now, in the previous slides, I showed you that we are taking same initial condition and we see that the collapse is happening. But here what happens, we take this initial condition here for L1 and see that the trajectories track this quasi-steady state attractor, both in cases. So, but in case of L2, when we start at this point, we see that it is not able to track the quasi-steady state attractor, but it goes to the unstable manifold. Even on changing the initial condition, we have fixed the critical rate, but we are able to see that for fixed critical rates, some initial conditions are experiencing a collapse, but there are certain set of initial conditions which do not experience the collapse. So to understand the mechanism behind it, we project this 2-dimensional manifold and we obtain a phase portrait of the desingularized system. Here, again, the red region is a stable one and the green region is the unstable one. Here, this dark red line is the fold line. We plot the eigen directions around this point, eigen directions for the equilibrium we have obtained. And we see that the eigen directions using this initial condition L1, this system is able to track the QSSA, but when we take the initial condition at L2, I have zoomed in this region here. In L2, what happens? It starts from the stable part, it crosses the fold line to follow the eigen direction actually. So the eigen direction eventually here is in the unstable part. So it has to follow the eigen direction. That is why it crosses the fold line. So this point here is the folded singularity. And we observe that for T less than T opt, the regions of very low temperature, this dark red region, this is the initial conditions for the collapse for T less than T opt. And for T greater than T opt, the regions of very high temperature are prone to warming induced collapse. So the extreme regions here are more prone to initial warming induced collapse for a fixed value of critical rate. Now, the next question that came into our mind was, what is the relationship between time scale separation and the critical rate of warming we have obtained? So this delta was the time scale separation between the environmental and the ecological processes. We see that as the delta increases, the critical rate required for warming induced collapse, that also increases. This observation is critically important because it is kind of intuitive also. We analyze that as the time scale separation is reduced, so that means species are not able to adapt to the environmental changes because it is also happening at a very fast scale. So the collapse can happen even at the low critical values. But in contrastingly, if we change the value of epsilon, which is the ecological time scale process, we observe the opposite output. Another thing that we have tried to attempt in this work is that the predictability of rate-induced transition. I could see through literature these two very predominant work of early warning indicators in rate-induced tipping. By one of them is by Jan Sieber, in which he has tried to understand the EWS in the virtue of rate-induced tipping, and he figured out that the early warning signals are delayed in the case of rate-induced tipping due to the delay in the tipping event actually. But in another work by Suture, he suggested that EWS works very well in case of rate-induced tipping. So the next question we attempted is, do the generic early warning signals predict the occurrence of warming-induced transition? So in this case, we consider an ensemble of 50 time series, stochastic time series, and we see that when the transition is happening in those stochastic time series for a fixed rate of critical rate of warming. So in first case, when t is less than t opt, we consider this deterministic trajectory, and any stochastic trajectory that is deviating around this delta r, we will consider as it has tipped already. So in this case, in the deterministic system, we observe no transition. But when we add stochasticity in the system, we observe that there is a transition at this is the transition, px is the transition points where the transition is happening. So this determines that even in the deterministic system, there was no transition, but in the stochastic system, we could see the transition. And in this case, the transition took place around this temperature, around 37 degrees Celsius, but on adding stochasticity in the system, the transition is now advanced mainly around 30 degrees Celsius. So noise essentially advances in the framework of temperature, it advances the tipping event. And we then use the early warning indicators such as autocorrelation function and coefficient of variation. For the 50 time series, we figure out the Kendall tau values as a mark of strength of these indicators, and we observe that no significant trend is given by these indicators. This is the Kendall tau distribution for t less than t opt, and this is for t greater than t opt. And we see that we cannot distinguish between false signals and true signals in this case. So in conclusion, I would like to summarize that even with the magnitude of change, while the population may persist, the rate of change can trigger sudden collapse in the system. Another thing we observed is that extreme temperature regions are more prone to warming induced collapse than the regions at intermediate temperature zones. And also the efficacy of generic early warning signals, it is highly challenged in case of rate induced tipping. Overall, while we study the critical transitions, it is very important to consider, apart from the magnitude of change, it is very important to consider the rate of change, because it can lead to transitions that we would not expect. And this paper is also available online. If anyone wants to see it in detail, can please take a look. Thank you.
Thank you. Question, please. Any question? Yes.
In the first, I think the first few slides, you showed that trajectory collapsing with the x-axis level is what? The temperature?
Yes, yes.
So how it will look like with time, like the trajectory, it is like collapsing Like temperature, and like I didn't get the trajectory with
So
the time
basically,
series.
in this case, if you see for temperature, because here temperature is changing with time, so there is a correspondence. But even if you see it in times, as a in the framework of time, at 10 particularly temperature 10, there is no collapse. But at temperature around this value, you will see that the trajectories around are with time it is around 0. But it is not possible in this case, because essentially this is kind of a phase space only, because temperature is also a state variable in this case. But we would expect that at particular instant, when the temperature has reached this value, it will be at the 0 state.
So the temperature is also near about 0.
Temperature is varying from 0 to 40. So this range from 0 to 40 is basically the feasible range for species to persist. Beyond this, above 40 and below 0, it is like the body protein buildup that decays, so they are not able to persist above below, like beyond this range.
Okay. Another question.
Yes.
There was, I think, alpha C something.
Yes.
Yeah.
One second.
Yeah. Can you please tell me that how it is related to this desingularized system, like in terms of?
In this desingularized system, we obtain the eigenvalues, which are the folded singularities, right? And we then determine the eigenvectors corresponding to that folded singularities. So this alpha C is coming from the, like, so eigenvector I am considering. Basically, if this is suppose I have a folded singularity and I am moving from one point to the folded singularity, I will move in the direction of eigenvector. So that is why I am deriving the eigenvectors, and moving in the eigen direction, I will reach the folded singularity, then I will cross it. So eigenvectors basically are important to determine here. The calculation is completely available in the supplemental, or we can discuss it also.
Okay, sure.
It became equilibrium points.
No, not the complete fold line, but for a fixed value of alpha C, I can get one particular fold point, folded singularity. Essentially, it turns out that for different alpha C, my folded singularity will change. The location will change. That I have not shown in these slides. But for different alpha C, in some sense, you are right that the location of the folded singularity will change, and it will be moving on the fold line. It will be available on the fold line itself. It will be on the fold line. Yes, because you see, for more clarity, see, this is where the folded singularity has to happen. So when you simplify this, you essentially get this fold line only. One second. This fold line only. This relationship, what you are seeing here, it is similar. So it is kind of fold line only. The folded singularity will be present on the fold line. Yeah.
Any other question? Since there are no questions, so let us thank Taranjot.